I hereby introduce to you Mr. Michael Veazey.
So let's talk about people who are just starting out. Let's say, people who are starting out with just $1,000 or $2,000 worth of product. It's not, it's not big yet. It's not proven yet. It may or may not turn into some kind of even a side hustle, never mind a full-time business for them. What's the best way to deal with this? Because obviously some of the overheads can seem a bit frightening and disproportionate.
Look, a lot of people do their initial test order and see if it's going to work. I did. When I sent in our very first order, I wasn't sure whether I was going to keep selling on Amazon. I wasn't sure whether this was something that was actually going to work. And it wasn't probably until order 2 or 3, and maybe we were doing $5,000 a month or something like that. And I started thinking, hang on, this is starting to work here. What if I put in a color variation? What if I stopped running out of stock and losing all my momentum in my ranking and actually just stayed in stock? And, I think everyone says one of the biggest things you can do wrong is to run out of stock. But I did that in the beginning. But once I got to the point where I realized I need to stay in stock, otherwise all my profit goes in getting myself back to the rank I was when I restock. That's a bit of gold for everyone. If you run out of stock, it costs you every order. It costs you the profit, basically, to get yourself back to the rank that you were before. So you've got to learn, don't run out of stock. But once I started working all these things out, and I started taking it seriously, that's when I got the policy and we got ourselves covered. So we find for a lot of people, it also depends on the product. Like mine was as boring as like a tablecloth. It was a really simple thing that, it's not like a pogo stick or a unicycle or something where you just think straight away, oh my goodness, I can't be selling this thing without having some sort of insurance cover. I wouldn't sell something like that. So you got to think about the product as well, because there's a big difference between a butter knife and a pocket knife. The butter knife would come into the low cost category, low risk, but you're selling a pocket knife, and it was a twist on a pocket knife, but I know it was over $10,000 US for that cover. There can be a lot of variation just in a knife, but you can see how the way you use it really influences that. So that's why we really actually have worked out a way to be able to give a person an indication of price, or at least a quote, online and easy. So it's not really a big drain on us for someone who is curious to jump online, fill out a fillable PDF and just say, listen, I'm thinking of going with this product here. This is my best shot. What would that cost per year? And most of the time, it was about the numbers you said, or even more conservatively, I would tend to suggest 9 times out of 10, it is not a ridiculously high price. But then I get surprised. I had one the other day, which was just how do I word it to be nice? But it was an adapter type thing that a person would use on a bicycle. And it was an adapter, and it changed the way that it would normally work in manufacture. That's the right way to word it. It changed the way the thing would normally work, and it made it just a bit more fancy and a little bit more user-friendly, but it was an add-on to something that was already a manufactured thing, and they didn't like it because they considered it touching something which had critical components, right? A bicycle got critical components. In other words, if the wheel falls off, the brakes fail, or you get the idea, it could go wrong. So they were, and I was like, I guess now I think about it. But at the time I went, no, I think you might be all right with that. But, sometimes I'm not a risk expert. I'm still learning like everyone else. So it doesn't hurt to check. So in summary, my point would be, if you're early in on the product research phase, but you're pretty sure your cost of goods are going to be right, there is a margin in it, you're getting serious, you're down to the pointy end of making a decision, get in contact with us and bring the insurance in there as a factor as well. And you can have it parked on the shelf, and if you don't go with it straight away, it doesn't matter. The policy is there waiting for you if you do come online 2 or 3 months later with a home run, a fantastically successful product. it's what everyone wishes to have.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in other words, don't over-egg protecting something when you have hardly any risk, and also you haven't got anything much to protect yet. And also the other thing you're saying is, which I think is always great advice, that project ahead. If this thing takes off, what will I need? So, talking to your accountant, talking to some kind of mentor or a coach who's been there before, talking to insurers, just getting the whole picture is just part of your decision-making process, which doesn't necessarily commit you to anything, right? But I think that makes a lot of sense to me, just to put that into the mix. And I think what's interesting about what you were just talking about, that sort of widget for the bicycle tire, is an interesting flip side of what we were just talking about. If there's a perception of risk, it's like 8 out of 10 level risk and it's only 3, that's an opportunity. If your perception of risk of something is only 3 out of 10 and you try and get insurance and they say it's like an 8 out of 10, that's a big hint that you've gone the other way and you thought it was a low risk product, but it's high risk. There's always a good reason why insurers come up with their numbers. I mean, I'm not saying they're always correct or perfect, but it's always a major hint that you might want to just walk the other direction, right? And I have come across that myself with various things where it looked on the surface of it quite straightforward, and then my insurer's gone, actually, it's going to cost 3 times as much to insure as the other products in your portfolio. I'm like, maybe that's a warning. So always worth having that as part of the sort of thought process, right?
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought a retractable dog leash is so dangerous, and could cause so many problems?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah. That's a sobering tale, right? I mean, definitely reasons to get insurance once you got stuff out on a significant scale. Let's talk about some country-specific things. Obviously, quite a few people listening to the podcast are Americans and will only sell in America. If you're only selling in America, can you get access to cheaper insurance than this sort of worldwide cover? I presume you guys talk about worldwide cover for your insurance policies. Is that right? I mean,
Yes.
That's the first thing I ought to talk about.
That's
actually.
right. Yeah, look, it's a good question, because for sellers who are based in the United States and are just going to sell only in the United States, then they are able to access policies there at a great rate, because the insurers in the States are familiar with Amazon, and there's more competition in the market between the insurance companies, so the rates are lower. However, as soon as that seller then decides to go over to the UK or to sell in Australia or EU, etc., and they have to go to those countries and get a policy there, it would work out better to just put it under the one policy and have worldwide cover. Now, we've set up broker partnerships with brokers in the UK, USA, New Zealand, and in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam. So we have brokers as part of the network that we are part of who we refer people to, and they are able to get access to that worldwide policy that Roxanne and I have been able to develop so that people can get access to that cover as well. But it is a great question for Americans in the States. They are in a unique opportunity for that.
Hey, great. Well, that's worth knowing. And I would say, though, one of the easiest and most insensible ways to expand your business is to get a proven product, which, as we all know, is the hardest thing to get. So you're going to get a supplier that delivers quality and at a profitable price, which is a hard combination to get. As soon as you got that, I think it's really very, very sensible to expand outwards from, say, Amazon.com, which, although I'm British and based in the UK, I actually started with, and then I expanded out to Europe, so Amazon.co.uk with the same product, and then into Germany. And then, of course, there's Japan, which everyone overlooks. But as soon as you got your products going, yes, it's harder to do product research there because most of the standard tools don't work there. But again, you can see that as a problem. I see it as a huge, huge opportunity. It's the 3rd biggest Amazon marketplace in the world, and it's literally 2 weeks from Japan. From the East Coast factories where most of the Chinese factories are to Japan, door to door, from the factory to the Amazon fulfillment center. So another amazing opportunity, at which point, you just want to make sure you tick the box marked worldwide insurance and then get on with expanding, because it's way easier than finding a product that you could another product to sell in the USA. It may feel more familiar. It may be comfort zone. But trust me when I say that getting a supplier and a product that is both profitable and high quality consistently, way, way harder than so-called international expansion, which in the end of the day, you're shipping stuff from China to USA. It makes little difference if you're shipping it from there to Europe. It's about the same transit time, it's about the same cost, and you've got some VAT and what have you. Just get good freight forwarder involved. and job done, really. It's actually not the hardest bit of the process, is what I would say as well. So
yeah, that's great advice, I think, too. Just
I'd encourage any Americans
people who are advanced sellers. Yeah, that's really good advice.
Yeah, I mean, not even necessarily advanced sellers. I would say, like, if you've got one or two product lines going, it's really already time to expand internationally. It's just a way easier way to make more money than it is to develop another product. And that may be counterintuitive if you haven't really done it yet, but the product development bit's the painful bit, as we all know, right? It's just really, as you said, the Chinese supplier nightmares. If you've got a good supplier, you've nailed the 80% of the difficult bit, in my humble opinion. But so, I think this could be very relevant to a lot of people. And hopefully, also, we're taking away the barrier of the worldwide insurance thing as an issue. That's one of the things that blocks people, I think, is that kind of fear of the unknown. So I think what you're enabling people to do is unlock that international expansion thing. So we've talked about product liability or general liability insurance and concluded that it's pretty much the same thing. What about suspension insurance? Because that's a thing that obviously is a big, well-known risk now, and it's right for people to see it as a big risk to their whole business, getting your Amazon account suspended. Is that something you guys can deal with?
Look, at the moment, we're putting a watch and hold on that whole section because Amazon has been, particularly in the EU, Amazon's been held accountable for the way in which they treat their sellers. In other words, suspensions for no real reasons or at no notice without giving that seller an opportunity to respond, to plead their case. And Amazon has been basically placed under a lot of pressure in the EU to change their practices to make themselves more fair and to do proper arbitration and work with the sellers and treat them a whole lot better than currently they do at the moment. That, if that goes through, is probably something will be adopted in other marketplaces, and that's going to affect suspension insurance. What suspension insurance covers sellers for is the event that their seller account gets closed or suspended for some reason. And let's say that the person was selling 20, 30, 50,000 a month in sales or 200,000 a month in sales, and Amazon shut them down for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You don't pay an excess with this insurance. The excess is in days. So in other words, you can't claim for the first 5 days. That gives the insurance company an opportunity. They have a panel of experts who work with Amazon to try and get your listing up and going again and get you selling again so they don't have to pay. After the days, then the insurance starts paying you, and it starts paying you on the amount that was in your seller account or coming in over the average of the months. So it takes into account a moving average. Obviously, most seller accounts anyway tend to skew out a little bit in Q4 and the Christmas rush. So they average that out over a year, and they say that on average you're doing approximately this amount. We'll insure you for 80% of this. We'll give you a 5-day excess, and then after that, let's say you're down for 20 days, you've got a 5-day excess. You could claim for 15 days at whatever many thousands of dollars, and the insurance company would pay. That is suspension cover and what it covers. There are a few clauses in there which at the moment we are on hold with as well, getting legal advice, because I want to be very careful not to recommend something that isn't a really good policy, something that I wouldn't buy for myself, correct? Like if I wouldn't buy it, I don't want to recommend it to anybody else. That's just the wrong way to just be as a human. So I'm not going to be pushing or promoting suspension cover at the moment, but it is something which, if we can get it right, like we have with product liability, I'd be so proud to then put that out to people, because it would be a little bit like income protection or sick pay or anything like that. It's protecting your income.
Great. Well, it's good to hear that you're working on that. And it's interesting to get the feedback, which I hadn't really been following, which I should go and investigate more about this, that Amazon's under pressure from the EU to be accountable for the way they treat their third-party sellers. And quite right too. I mean, there's not a single third-party seller out there who doesn't feel aggrieved at times. And I'm sorry to say this, if you're just starting out, I mean, it's not all is rosy in the garden. It is an extraordinary opportunity, but Amazon does tend to treat you in a rather offhand way, to say the least. That's certainly way overdue in pretty much everyone's opinion. So we'll have to see how that pans out. And I like the fact that you're not prepared to put something out that is half baked, and that speaks well for you. So yeah, let's keep an eye on this and see how that landscape changes over time. So interesting stuff there, and quite hopeful for us as sellers as well. So the last area then, I guess, that insurance traditionally covers is shipping and cargo insurance. Now, it's not something people tend to discuss much. Is that something you really think is important? How high does that risk rate on your sort of scale of importance and risk for you?
Most people take out shipping and cargo insurance with their freight forwarder. If they don't, all they've got to do is do a quick Google search on the container ship that rolled over last week in Georgia. The thing was 200 meters long. It was a 2017 build, so it was a new ship. It was carrying plant machinery and motor vehicles, and it had gone through the storm. I know it was a whole string of unfortunate events. However, that's what insurance is all about. The whole ship rolled over, and the loss would be just enormous. So we all hear about containers going overboard, or we hear about stock arriving and it's damaged. So first rule, no matter what you do, whenever you ship your stock, always have it insured, whether it's through your freight forwarder or through your own policy. A really big way to save, though, is to just organise an annual policy. Now, your local insurance broker or insurance agent would be able to cover this for you. It's just called an A to B cover, world to world, and it covers your stock when it's leaving China, India, Amazon, Vietnam, until it arrives at its location. Whether that be your third-party logistics or Amazon changes depending on how you've set up your business, but it's called A to B. The policy we recommend and we refer to people, and we could give people who have access to it in other countries a checklist, but it would be a checklist to check things like, is accidental damage covered? And what does that involve? Is water damage okay? Is dropping of it okay? You want to just be to be sure, first of all, if your container goes missing, you're going to get back the whole amount. Let's just start there. Heaven forbid that happens. Next thing, though, if there's you see those ships, they're stacked up high. They're going through, Asia and driving rain and wind, and you want to make sure those containers don't have a hole. I would recommend to everyone, just before you get your container loaded, you can pay to get what's called a container inspection, where an inspector will walk in your container and they'll turn off the lights and walk around, and they'll just check to see that there's no light coming in the cracks and the corners. It costs about $100. It's nothing. I would recommend that to everyone listening, even though it's got nothing to do with insurance, but sometimes you want to self-insure, right? You want to have your insurance and make sure you get that check done, because the whole process is hectic enough. You don't want dramas. And if you use your local agent or broker, or you use us, if something happens to your stock, the best benefit is you are ringing and speaking to us, not some guy in China who's a mate of the guy who has the freight forwarding company. Do you know? Because the freight forwarders aren't insurance companies. They're just acting as a broker to someone who sells insurance, correct? They're just kind of funneling it through them. So I can only imagine how difficult it would be dealing with China myself, how difficult it would be to try and make an insurance claim through China. So that's just a quick tip on shipping and cargo. Sort your own. You'll save a lot of money and you'll get way better protection.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually. I mean, the point of insurance, I guess, is not just having it in the abstract, but what happens if you actually need to claim. And you're quite right. I mean, without being, inappropriate about this, I mean, the way the Chinese deal with straightforwardness versus evasion, I mean, I don't know how to put this in the right way, but in my experience, part of Chinese culture is part of East Asian culture, and it's a cultural difference one has to respect, that it's very rude to say no, so they just never say no. So if you ask a direct yes, no question to a Chinese person, or for that matter, a lot of East Asian culture, can you cover this? They won't say no, but that doesn't mean that they can't. I mean, it's just part of the culture. Now, that's something you can respect and work with. Again, there's something in China, it is quite high in the corruption scale, in the global corruption scale. So you're not always going to get the truth either, which is a different issue. So what I suppose I'm trying to walk around here is that you're probably better off getting insurance via somebody you know and trust, or at least somebody in the West that's proven, right? Because it's going to be a lot less
advice.
I don't know how to put this politely.
It's easy.
You just need to have your wits around there. There is some Chinese saying which Tim Ferriss referenced, and I don't know what it is because my Mandarin is pretty non-existent, but it's some saying like, whoever you can fool, you should fool them. Now, that's not necessarily true for all suppliers, and I want to blanket them, but I don't think it's good to be naive when you're working with the Chinese, put it that way. And I just think, the more you can simplify stuff, the better, really. And I'm going to stop going down that route because it's going to make me look like a massive racist, but I'm just working from experience, really. I mean, I'm happy to have opposite experiences. And I have to say also, just to put the flip side to that the Chinese guys not only work unbelievably hard, but it's very common for people to fly over to the Canton Fair, and their Chinese supplier or their main agent will get on a train that takes them 30 straight hours of travel to come from their factory to work with them. So they have incredible virtues as well. But, being naive and trusting is probably not the way to go. Let's just wrap up with really what you guys do. You're very clearly expert in this area. You've given a whole bunch of great value and a lot of simplification and putting some myths to bed, which is great stuff. Thank you so much for that. So tell us, who do you guys serve at, and make sure I get your name right, online sellersinsurance.com.au. Who do you guys serve and who do you not serve?
Look, ideally, we will help anyone who has a query. So if you aren't in Australia, UK, US, New Zealand, and etc., where I mentioned before, where we have referral partners, we will do our best to source and help the inquiry. We're very much about giving value to the person. So if someone asks us a question, even if there's nothing in it for them, like the number of phone calls, the number of times I've responded and helped people and given advice, and there's no way I can actually get anything out of it. It's not the most important thing to me, because if I find, word of mouth in this whole thing is something which people really value. It even seems to be, while we actually don't do business normal ways anymore, there's no one's shaking hands, no one's even printing paper anymore, everything's electronic. A person's reputation and their ability to just be a great person and give great service through this digital medium, I just find fascinating. I'm just amazed at how when someone is genuine and, doesn't give a false representation. I mean, you talked about Adam Hudson earlier in the talk about, how, one of the few you'd recommend. And I mean, it's been everything I've ever had to do with him as well. It's just a stand-up straight shooter. Being straight with people and also being of service, I think gets people a long way. So look, if people do have questions or queries or they send their emails, like our email address, maybe they could just Google it. So let's not keep putting things out. But if they search for onlinesellersinsurance.com.au, that's easy enough because it's online sellers and it's insurance. So it's just australia.com.au. You will find our website. And if you send us an email, if we can't handle it, we will find a way to answer the question the best we can for you, and we'll just help people out with all things we've covered tonight in the chat. All things insurance, we're here to help.
That's great. Thank you. And as you say, being helpful and being trustworthy are two things that are not as common as they could be online. And if you don't have a stable full of Lamborghinis behind you, but you give honest advice, you're probably more likely to win trust over time. So that's great to hear that. And we'll put a link up as well. So if you go to amazingfba.com/OS insurance, we'll put links through to you guys as well. And people can come and get some advice and just get a bit of comfort and a bit of, realistic risk assessment, because I think that's one of the things. Insurance is one of those areas where people worry a lot, and sometimes they don't worry enough because they are about to sell something that they shouldn't, because it will be high risk. But a lot of the time, as you discussed, and I think that's a lovely point to end on, is that actually a lot of the time we think the risk is very high and it's actually very moderate. And if we can see that and other people don't, that gives us a huge competitive advantage, and we've never needed it more. So that's a great positive.
Yeah, and it's so simple, 10 minutes to fill out the form, and 3 or 4 days later we've got the quote back for them. You know, it's very simple. It's not a hard thing to do. Like I said, no tricks. There's nothing complicated, difficult. It's all kind of really just straightforward, and the peace of mind that comes from just knowing, and especially like having a chat. Like, I love to get on the phone and have a talk to people. So as much as possible, they get to speak to me or Roxanne, and then our first in command is Tash, who's an absolute quoting legend. She is, whenever there's a trick or a query, she doesn't just say, no, we can't help you. She hunts hard to make sure that, we can really get a great rate for people as well.
Great. Well, that's all very reassuring stuff. And as you say, in the end, it comes down to, being determined to try and help people and serve people. So that's very reassuring to hear. So look, Peter, we better wrap it up. It's great to get so many gems from you. And thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
I've enjoyed it, Michael. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.